This video, we want to talk about some common questions that people will ask when it comes to planning their money. That's a common question, right? Now, to answer this question, usually you will need to use some series of complicated TVM formula. But most of us are pretty lazy and using the formula can be quite complicated. So recently a friend of mine introduced me to using P10. All you need to do is just key in a few data, then you can get the answer you want.
Okay, so I want to retire by 50, but my living expenses cost up to 2,500 ringgit a month. Is that possible?
All you need to do is just go to Advisory, click Retirement, then select how much do I need during my retirement. Once you click in, key in the data. Now, Jasmine's current age is 25 years old and she plans to retire at 50 years old. Growth rate basically means how much of return is she gonna get out of her savings. Now, assuming Jasmine were to save in an ETF or an index fund, the chances are over the next 20 to 30 years, her returns will be at about 7 to 8%. So let's just put it at 7 to be safe. Inflation rate. Now, we all know that inflation is happening all the time. So this is the projected inflation rate that we think will be happening for the next 20-30 years. Assuming it's gonna be at about 3%, which is the standard number that statistic department will kind of give us. Jasmine mentioned that her monthly expenses currently is about 2,500 ringgit. And all you need to do is press this button here. Voila! So now we can see, based on this, Jasmine will need 896,000 to live for the next 20 years post-retirement with an income of 62,813 ringgit.
Oh, okay. But what if I live up to 90 years old?
No problem. All you need to do is just go to this item number 4 and change the number of living years post-retirement. Say, if Jasmine thinks that she's gonna live until 90 years old, let's change this number to 40. Then click the calculate button. The answer will be 1.3 million. Basically, this means that if Jasmine were to retire by 50 years old and if she wants to use this money all the way until 90 years old, she will need to have a retirement capital of 1.3 million ringgit in her bank account at 50 years old. Some of you may think that all these numbers here can be a little bit confusing and you prefer to look at graphs. All you need to do now is just go to the graph section and you will get a graph that is easier to understand. The green bar here represents the inflated cost of living every year, and if you want to know her balances every year after withdrawal, all she needs to do is just click this button here. Then she will get her balance in her bank account every time after a withdrawal. As we can see, this balance will slowly reduce and by 40 years, it will finish.
So I have 2 kids and I want to send them to overseas to further their studies. So how much do I need to save?
Now that is a very good question, right? Because I myself as a parent also am wondering, how much does it cost for me to send my kids to university? All you need to do is just go to Education, click All Case Studies. Here it will give you a reference of the kind of university my kid wants to go to and roughly how much will it cost. Frankie wants to send his kids to overseas studies. It will cost him about at least 100,000 per year in school fees. Once you have a rough estimation of the school fees needed for a year, then click Data Point. As Frankie said, he has 2 kids, so we are going to change this into 2 kids. Hey Frankie, what's the name of your children?
They are and
So after keying in the name, all he needs to do is key in the age. Then select the university that the children will be going to and the number of study years. Then the estimated school fee a year, assuming 100,000 a year. This column will be automatically tabulated for us. 16 years later, Lang will be 18 years old, so time for university, right? And 14 years later, Louis will be 18 years old, so time to go university. Now, the next column, inflation rate. Let's just keep it at 3%. And growth rate is basically how much of returns is Frankie gonna get from his savings. Let's just put it at 7%. Then click calculate. Ta-da! Now you straight away get the answer. Lang, who's 2 years old, he need to prepare 671,000, and for his daughter Loy, he need to prepare 632,000. So total he need 1.3 million ringgit in order to send both his children to university. Education so expensive lah. If he wants a breakdown of the education fee and how is it affected by inflation, he can always click the education fee part here, which gives a breakdown of how inflation will affect the education fee. As we can see here, 16 years later, the education fee will not be 100,000 a year, but it will be more like 160,000 to 175,000 a year. Very expensive. Now, if you do not like to look at table, you can always click the graph version, then you get more of a bar chart that you can see clearly at one glance. Still the big question, how am I going to be able to save 1.3 million, right? Now, here's where all you need to do is just click the proposed strategy part. Once you click there, you can immediately see a breakdown on how can you achieve this amount. As we can see here, there are a few methods that Frankie can do to achieve this amount. He can either save 1,712 ringgit monthly from now onwards into an investment with 7% rate of return, then he can get 600 over 1,000 for his children's education fee, or either he can save on a yearly basis 20,000, or he can save today a lump sum amount of 205,000. So it depends on which is more convenient for him. And if you want to find out how much he needs to save for the other daughter, all he needs to do is change the tab for the kid. And now we can see that to save for Louis' education, he needs to save 2,000 ringgit a month from now onwards, or either yearly 23,000, or either a lump sum of 221,000 today.
I want to buy a house that's worth 700,000 ringgit. I got 2 loans offer right now. Bank A gives me 2.95% interest rate, but no need to buy MRTA. But Bank B offers me 2.9%, but I need to buy MRTA for 22,000 ringgit.
This one also very good question. Anyone buying a house? You probably will be asking the same question. Should you take a loan with lower interest rate but you need to pay extra for MRTA? Or should you take a loan that has a slightly higher interest rate but you don't need to pay for MRTA? Which is better? This one really quite complicated if you were to do the calculation yourself. But let's try it out with P10. Just go to Mortgage and select Understanding the Basics of My Mortgage Loan. As we know, the house value is 700,000. This means that the loan amount that CK will be taking will be 630,000. The MRTA amount for loan A is 0 because no MRTA, right? But for mortgage B, it will be 22,000 ringgit. Both will have a tenure of 30 years. The effective lending rate here will be 2.95% for mortgage A and 2.9% for mortgage B. Then click the calculate button. Now you get a full view of mortgage A and mortgage B comparison. As you can see, for mortgage A, CK will need to pay 2,639 ringgit a month for the installment, but if he takes out mortgage B, he will end up paying 2,713 ringgit. So that's about 100 ringgit more. Why? That is because for mortgage A, he doesn't need to take an MRTA. So his loan amount is just 630,000. But for mortgage B, he will need to take the MRTA. So that's another 22,000 on top of 630,000. That makes his total loan amount 650,000. Over the next 30 years, CK will also pay less for mortgage A than mortgage B. For mortgage A, he'll end up paying 950,000. But for mortgage B, he will be paying 976,000, which is 26,000 ringgit more.
Oh, I see. Hey, but some people say MLTA is better. So MRTA or MLTA is better actually?
Yes! That one is a very common question by people as well. Should you take MRTA or MLTA? Let me help you to understand it better with P10. Just go to the mortgage part, click single risk MRTA planning, key in the data, then select risk management. MRTA is actually called mortgage reducing term assurance. This means that the payout benefit every year will be reduced. It's very important if you want to get an MRTA, you have to check with the loan officer the benefit payout schedule over the next 30 years. What is the amount going to be? Then what you can do is key in that amount into this P10 calculator, assuming these are the numbers I get. Once you key that in, click calculate, then switch to the graph mode. select MRTA, then you can see the graph of the coverage on MRTA against the total outstanding loan. If the red line is below the orange line, this tells you that there's a gap in your coverage. For example, if on year 10, if something happens to you, the MRTA will pay out 400,000, but your outstanding loan is 478,000. This means whoever that's gonna inherit your property will need to fork out 78,000 to pay for the property. This means that there is a gap in the benefit. So when you purchase an MRTA, you want to be sure that you don't have too big a gap. And even better, there is no gap. So why do I personally prefer MLTA? Because if I can afford a 600,000 ringgit MLTA, this is going to be my coverage. Every year, from year 1 to year 30, my payout will be the same in the event of anything happens to me. If I pass away, it's going to be 600,000 being paid out. That amount is more than enough to cover my loan. And if 30 years later, I've already paid off my loan and something happened to me, I get a house and I also get another 600,000 ringgit for my family. Along the years, I will readjust my benefit according to my needs, since it's way more flexible than MRTA. That is how you can use P10 to actually answer all these common financial planning questions that we usually face. As we can see, sometimes money questions can be really complicated. Traditionally, we have been using Excel sheets or either just a simple financial calculator, but it can be really complicated and you tend to make mistakes. So using a program like P10 really saves a lot of our time and also help us to make planning a lot easier and more accurate. So if you want to get your personal financial questions being answered, go and check out P10 in the link below.